Hi, Shweta.
Hi, are we connected?
I think we're live.
I think you're right.
Want to check?
It says we're starting soon. So tends to be a bit of a lag. Wait for the host to start. I am the host. Um, okay.
Okay, if anyone can see us or hear us, drop a comment so we know we're still
No,
experimenting.
no, it says. Yeah, I can see the video here. There's a lag in the thing, right? So it's a bit confusing. Okay. So let's start.
Yeah.
Right? There's a bit of a lag. That's why it appears to me, but I think we're live. Let me just. Yeah, it's there. Let's go.
Okay.
So I'm putting off the audio in the LinkedIn. Let's begin. Chalo. Hey Ramya, good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening. So this
Yeah.
is our round two of the episode.
This is episode 2. Yeah,
Yeah.
exciting. I don't know who's joining us today. I am not yet figured out how to see comments, but if you see comments,
I can see on my feed. So
yeah, that's
Vikram
good.
is here, and I know we are live. Right.
That's great.
Hi,
Okay.
Vikram.
Yeah, hi. So I've got to figure that piece out, but I'm going to continue with our conversation. Um, so, Ramya, as we discussed, what we really want to talk about today is juggling multiple identities, right? Um, this is a topic it's a fairly evolved and complex topic. I'm not going to call it evolved. It's just it's complicated. So let's do this over 4 episodes, where today is just the beginning. We focus on the fundamentals. We just speak about the basics about what is identity. How do we even define identity? What is identity? What does it mean? Right? What does it mean to you? What is our understanding of it? Right? And how it evolves through life. Is it fixed? Is it variable? Just understanding the idea of identity today. Right? Then the thing that I am particularly passionate about is how over the last maybe the last 100 years or so, there is one identity that has taken over for all of us, right? And I think over the next few episodes, I really want to go into what that means. What does it mean when there's a singular identity that takes over? And finally, I want to introduce the idea that all of us actually have multiple identities, right? And how do we go around balancing across these identities? I think that's going to be, I think, the flow. How does that sound?
I think it sounds perfect, and I'm glad we're going to be doing this over a series because it is rich, complex, multifaceted, and we can go do one deep dive in each of our conversations. So,
Yeah, fantastic. So why don't you begin with, I know you do work around identities as well. So why
yeah.
don't you begin with and my work as a coach also, of course, gets me to work with identity. Why don't we begin with our understanding of identity, what that means?
Yeah, okay. So very simply, so as you know, I work with inner sovereignty and I work with mental models. So mental models are like little maps or frameworks or ideas that we have in our brain, like these little creations, knowledge structures related to anything, right? And we have mental models about everything. So identity for me is my mental model about who I am, the mental model that answers who I am. And if you look at identities, I'm also borrowing here not just from my understanding, but from what I've seen picked up from the field of psychology and OB, where identity is often described as a parliament of selves, like nested, like think of Venn diagram that's very, very, right? So like if I say who am I, right now I'll start getting all these answers. I am a woman. I am a mother. I am a professor. I am a speaker, right? I am an Indian. I am a dog lover. So each of these answers to who I am is actually like this. And so they're nested. Some are between, some are overlapping. And so that's that parliament of selves and mental models. So little knowledge structures in our head, and they're not all salient at the same time. So that's otherwise we'd be quite insane.
And what do you mean by parliament of selves? That's such an exciting idea.
So, so it's like, like the parliament has levels and members. So it's like that, right? So let's say even professional identity for me is like a parliament. Within that, I have author, writer, speaker, professor, right? Within that. And then, my family is an identity. And within that, I have mother and I have, wife and daughter and sister. And so it's like that parliament structure, really. That's what it's, that's the idea.
That's fascinating. So I was trying to articulate what identity means to me. And one of the things, and I was obviously reading up and searching, and my own understanding of it is it's what ties me to myself at various points in my life. Right?
Beautiful.
It's a sense of continuity between how do I know that this is me, right? It's that sense of continuity of between who I was 20 years later to now. So I think to me, identity is at its very core, it is that continuous thread that uh, runs through that one thing that over time I think builds the idea of who I am, right? And as
Wonderful.
you were talking about parliament of selves, and before the conversation, I was thinking of what to me is a great metaphor for identity, right? For me, a lot of it is like it's like a tree that's growing, and each year there's a ring that gets formed,
Nice.
right?
And the insides are still there, right?
And
They
the
just
insides
grow.
are still there,
Yeah.
and then the ring gets formed, and then there are branches that grow out. There are each of these identities, then from the core you have various branches, and then that gives rise to sub branches, and then sometimes some branches fall off because of you
Yeah.
lose your identity, right?
And
And
yes.
and another identity comes up, another new branch grows. So we are constantly growing these branches, and we are constantly becoming like trees in some sense, right? So to me, that's what, uh,
Beautiful.
yeah,
I love that metaphor, Shweta. It brings in the growing on past selves as well as, allow allowing things to grow and come. Okay, so let's talk about the challenges. Or should we first talk about what you mentioned when we opened, which is over the last 100 years, there seems to be this one singular identity that seems to have become so important in our society and in our professional lives for people like us, right? This might not be true in the for people who still live in forests and tribes in the Andamans and all, but for people like us, yeah, white collared professionals especially.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, the it's been bothering me for a long time, actually, and the idea that so much of our sense of self comes from our work,
Yes. You
right?
know where it's been irritating me, not
Yeah.
now, but for the last 30, 40 years. And when it irritates me the most, when you go into a party
Hmm.
or when you go into a casual, a picnic, a hike, a trek, right? And people ask you, so what do you do?
Hmm.
And you're like, dude, I've come here, and I used to go, and I still go on treks, and on one particular group treks, and used to go with BMC and stuff like that. And I remember one entire trek, I was so irritated by this whole thing of professional identity taking over and masking everything else. I actually decided to tell people I'm not going to reveal it because nobody there knew me, and I wanted to be free of my professional identity. At that time I was a professor, and I didn't want to take that with me on the trek because I didn't want people to relate to me through that. And I literally refused to say. And the entire weekend trek I didn't. So everything else I would talk about my son and all, but I wouldn't say. And at the end of it, when we had made friends and all on the trip back, there was this young 20 something guy, and he said, "You know what, in the beginning of the trek, when you didn't say, I thought you were some celebrity actress or something." And why would you not say if you're a professor? And I was like, so
Oh.
that, yeah, it really annoys me that the professional identity has become this big mammoth main question.
And for me, it bothers me because, when you're filling out forms and various things, and, even when periods when I was actually unemployed and doing nothing, and I was a mother and a homemaker, and I'm a very proud mother and a very proud. I love. If you asked me the single biggest identity that fulfills me in a very cliched way, is actually that of being a mother, right? And yet, I really struggle to acknowledge that. I really struggle when everyone asks me and say I'm a storyteller, I'm a coach, I'm an entrepreneur. I have all these various versions of professional identities that I hold on to very, very tightly, to the point where, even like basic practical things, visa applications, like it's just simpler to declare myself as somebody's wife as opposed to being in. It bothers me. It bothers me a lot to do that, right? Because it's such an integral part of who I am. But it's fine to have a professional identity. I think we all thrive in it. It gives us richness. I think the part that bothers me is how much of our time, energy, resources, love we pour into that one identity to the exclusion of pretty much anything else, right? Over time, if you see the trajectory of work, right, from maybe 150 years ago as a role of subsistence, the role of work for most people was to provide for families or to survive, you know. From that, it has transformed, and the meaning in lives came from community, it came from, roles in communities, and sort of like a group identity, at least in Asian cultures, right? And so much of your meaning came from doing other things. But I think now that that centerpiece in the village, so to speak, right, the idol has been replaced in some sense by work, right? The work is now a source of meaning, it is a source of fulfillment, it's a source of purpose, it is a source of relationships, it is pretty much everything, right?
you know I actually like all that. So I like and teach and encourage people to see work for the blessing that it can be in our life. And so for me personally, yeah, work is, and I encourage more and more people to make work a source of meaning, fulfillment, relationships, ways to even bond with your, like, I work with my husband and I love that, right, with people you like. So I like the fact that work can play all those roles in our lives. And yet I don't want it to be that singular identity who I am, right? It's like me and my work, and it can be this huge contribution on many dimensions. But there are going to be other things also, like my hobbies and relationships, which also contribute. So I think it's that dampening. Like, I don't mind work being such a big thing in our life, but that the work identity becoming the only big thing inside our heads is I think it's also unhealthy.
Yeah, and if I were to come back to the world of metaphors, sorry, I'm back to trees.
Yes, let's do
Uh,
that.
I'm back to trees. I think I look at the idea of a single sort of, and I've used this metaphor in a completely different context in something I wrote previously, but I, to me, it is, like the redwood tree, like, you pour everything into this big giant tree that grows big and tall, and we all want to be that in our professional lives. Big, famous, strong, tall, everything. But our our more diverse identity is actually a little bit more like a banyan tree. You have many roots. You
I
end
know.
up putting, you end up having a broader base, so to speak. Right? It's a little bit more spread out. You put roots in various identities.
And that makes us more resilient and strong, right?
Yeah.
If one gets, and of course one can get chopped off or
Yeah.
burnt off, or we might want to shed one off. We're not like holding on to it saying isko choda to, like if I leave this, then what will happen to the rest of me and rest of my yeah, it's not
Yeah.
like. So I like the retirement blues, like for people for whom work is the only professional identity is the only one. When those people retire, they have, and I've known people who've had significant, you know crisis time, like who am I, I'm suddenly nothing. And not just in terms of self esteem, but also in terms of how people around them treat them.
Yeah.
Versus, I've seen the latter also, where, they very gently transition into nurturing and building their grandfather identity or social service or community or reading or fitness, and, allowing all those things, or spiritual, and
Hmm.
letting those other roots of the banyan tree carry them. So
Yeah.
that's what
So
I
yeah, I think that's to me is what I think the difference. That's the one, and I like that you and I we didn't discuss this, but we have slightly different opinions on this, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I like that we are going to probably not entirely agree on all of everything that we spoke
Yeah.
about, right? So that's going to be interesting. Um, what do you want to speak about? Do you want to introduce the idea of, so what is multiple identities to you? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So for me, multiple identities would be the all the answers I have to who I am, right? So like even on my when I introduce myself, I've put like four things there. So I call myself a poet, professor, parent, philosopher, and of course there are more, but looking at these, and I felt like it was very important for me to always present myself in these four. So this is my answer to all those annoying parties and picnics and hikes now. When people ask who am I, I don't have to say I won't tell you like I used to, and I can at least give these four pillars to say, like, relate with a bit of a holistic person that I am, like,
Hmm.
uh, so that to me is that multiple identities, having many answers to the basic question of who am I.
So, what are your four identities? These are your four. These
These
are
are
your
my
primary.
top
You
four,
said
but there are
poet,
many others also. Dog lover is not there in this, but yeah,
pet parents to keep up with your pee thing,
yeah.
yeah,
Pet parent.
or pet lover. Yeah. So, at any point in time, how many identities do you juggle?
Any point in time,
How many identities do you juggle?
do I juggle? So interestingly, so I'll just get a bit into psychology and come back here. So there's a term in psychology called salience. So I'm going to link identities back to these mental models. And for most of us in our minds, depending on the our mind's ability to hold complexity and simplicity and focus and all of that, certain identities will become salient. So I've sort of trained my mind to literally, like when I walk into a classroom, have the professor identity salient. So
Hmm.
at that point, I'm really, the other identities are there, but they're in the background. They're like, they're there in my database, but they're not, I'm not operating out of that. So think of salience as what is the clothes that I'm. Shweta, do you know the Asian women experiment on multiple identities?
No.
On salience? Can I
Yeah.
tell it?
Actually, by the way, somebody is asking, can you see comments? I'm seeing some.
I can see comments on my feed.
Yeah, Vikram, somebody, I think Vikram
Yeah,
and one
professional
other has
ID. So
commented.
yeah, it's not a question, just a So
Acha,
he
okay.
says professional identity masks everything else while rest identities are so yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this Asian women experiment. So it might, I hope it doesn't hurt anyone, okay? But I'm going to just narrate it as it is, and then if you want to discuss my thoughts about it and yours, we can. It's a little bit going into dangerous territory, okay? But I'll first just narrate the experiment as it is. So this was done in the US sometime back, and the subjects of this experiment were Asian women living in the US. So the multiple identities that they were looking at is these women had two identities. Like they were just
Yeah.
comparing, right?
So
Asian, I'm
this,
an Asian, I'm a woman. So they called these people into the lab, and they were two groups. So in group one, they were greeted by women researchers, given focus group questions on, women issues and all of that, and different things. And at some point, they were also given a math test,
hmm.
and then they did multiple tasks, and then they left. In the second group, when they came in, they were treated by Asian researchers, and they were given Asian food, asked questions like how is it to be an Asian living in US and all. And then they were given again that same math test, and then some other tests, and said tata bye bye.
Same women,
No, two different
two
groups.
different groups. Yes, yes.
Comparable samples, right?
Right,
So
right.
same, similar demographics and all. So these are two groups. Now, what they were doing is this is the saliency. So for the first group, the woman identity was made salient inside their own brains. For the second group, Asian identity was made salient in their own brains. And they were given the math test. And then the average scores between both these groups was compared. So Shweta, let me ask you now, do you think there was a difference in the average math test results of?
Absolutely. I would think that the Asian would have been done way better than the
Yeah,
woman. Yeah.
they did. Right? So I know it still gives me goosebumps. I don't want this to be true, but it was true. And, and this is a very robust experiment. They don't have to repeat it, but the experimenters actually repeated it after 6 months. They called them, they reversed, and again they found. So these are very robust results. And as you can see, this is the power of saliency of identity. So this is basically, and this is also about individual identity and collective identity, right? So stereotypes are basically like collective beliefs and identities.
That's
So
what I was going to
we
say,
should
that
talk about stereotypes
the
also.
stereotypes are so powerful, right?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, for the first group, and I know it's clear for you because you said women, but just for our audience, I'll just break it down. For the first group, a participant you was, saying, I am a woman, and there's a general belief stereotype. That's what it is, that women are not so great at math. And then for the second group, I am an Asian, and again a general belief and stereotype that Asians are not. And this
Asians
affected
are
their
great at math. Asians
self-efficacy
are
and
good
showed
at
up.
math. Yeah.
Sorry?
I think the second one is that Asians are great at math.
Great
That's
at math,
the
right. And this affected their self-efficacy, self-belief, and therefore showed into performance and results. So this experiment was a big turning point. I came across it like years ago in my PhD. So that's one of the reasons why, like before going into a class, I consciously make the most salient identity salient and then say operate out of this because it'll change the results.
Wow, that is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's powerful in the sense that it also tells you about identity is not just you, it's also about, it's, there's so many factors that influence. To me, there's so much in that anecdote, is that when we spoke about identity, we spoke about ourselves. We didn't speak about all the various elements that influence identity, right? It is so much of, it's like the winter, the seasons, it is the environment, the soil, all of that influences the tree
Yeah.
that you become, right? It
Yeah.
is your relations, it's who you are, it's beliefs, it is narratives, it is, community, it is social. There's so many elements that play into.
Language, communication, right?
So there's so many elements
Everything gets primed from that,
yeah.
which identity is.
So I was actually doing a little bit of, again, reading up about how many identities is it normal for people to have, and apparently there are People can have dozens of identities, which is believable, right? I'm a global nomad. I'm somebody
Yes.
who I'm a Bangalorean. I'm also a Puneri. I am,
Mhm.
I'm a
Yeah.
professional. I'm an entrepreneur. I can imagine at least a dozen identities for me, right? And just if you were to just look at all the 25 or 30 WhatsApp groups that we are on, each of this is based on, there's a pet parent group, there's a Korean drama group. Each of those cater to one of our identities in some sense, right? There's a there's a caregiver group. There's so many of these. Each of these are in some sense
Yeah.
things we do, but also at some sense reflective of who we are, right? I wanted to explore one more thing. I think we have 5 more minutes. Why is this sense of identity such a powerful one? How does it help shape who we do? I mean, you gave that beautiful example, right? But internally, how can we use that sense of identity to show up in our lives in powerful ways?
Can I get a little spiritual
Yeah,
with permission? So, okay, and aside, there's also a question on the group. I will answer this and then we'll take the question in the end.
yeah,
So, I loved what you said, and I'm just going to speak on what I do, right? So, I am I treat my identities in almost like an engineer,
hmm,
like very technically, because like mental models, I treat my mind also very technically. It's like, hey, there are mental models, how can I use this, make this work for me rather than against me, and therefore identity is there. So I'll actually use it to my advantage. So for example, when I'm really down, when I'm in failure, when or something, I'm very things are happening, this is happening, that I love to go with, there's like something called Nirvana Shataka. Like the Hindu philosophy has one way of Ramana Maharshi's question of who am I, which is I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And ultimately, I'm not only this, right? So, and then you get into this, I'm almost nothing. So it's like that the reductionist thing of saying I'm not this, I'm not this. So I do that in tough times. And it gives me a strength of core, right? On the other, at other times, let's say I'm going to go to speak like a speaker or a teacher, or it's a very it's a very closed context or an exam right? There I'll actually, before the exam or before the event, before the thing, I'll prime myself with whatever I believe and know is going to be the most uh, advantageous identity to use as a platform to play, right? To play that tennis match or whatever from. And I'll pick that identity. So, so literally like wearing clothes, like we wear costumes. So I use identities like that. I don't know if that's the wisest thing to do or best things to do. I do know that it is very effective.
yeah. That's such a, for me, while I have multiple identities, I don't know if I flip across them as seamlessly as you do. I still feel I have one or two salient identities, and I don't know if I transition to my other identities as well as I should when I'm in that situation. So I think there's something to be learned from you on that.
Again,
Um,
I mean, I don't know if that's, you might like it like it's a very tactical way of living life also. I don't know. It works, it's functional.
and there is this other insight. There's a question there. When
Yeah.
multiple identities demand attention at once, what guiding principle helps you prioritize one without eroding the others?
Yeah. So, so my guiding principle is, what's the task here? What's the function? What's my role? What do I want to do? Do I want to build a relationship? Do I want to empower another person? It could be a kid, it could be a family member, it could be a client. Do I want students to listen to me? Do I want to, make an impact? So very clearly, so I'm always guided by what do I want to do in this context? Why am I showing up? And therefore, what is the identity? Which is there is a risk with that. It is sort of being on the go all the time, so I balance that off with spaces where like I'm walking in nature, walking my dog, and no identity, nothing. So that's just want to tell you that that helps me do this when I so have a functional thing. What
Yeah.
about you, Shweta?
Um, for me, I think the answer is, let's take a practical example, right? Let's say while I'm doing this LinkedIn live, say I there's an urgent task, or when I'm doing my work, I have a deadline. Say my daughter wants something out of me, right? Which is, I mean, that's a more common thing for women. Or I have my identity as a fitness lover that conflicts with a meeting schedule, right? And I really don't want to move the meeting schedule out. I mean, I don't want to move my fitness program out. And it's happened to me where I've had to. So I think it is, I don't know if there's a one size fits all. It depends on that particular situation, right? Uh, there are times, like if I take the fitness, it's happened to me often where I have a very odd gym time, like 4:45 in the evening. It kind of clashes with work meetings, you know. But I really value my identity as someone who is fit or who's trying to be fit, right? So I don't want to give that up for a work meeting, right? So how I balance that in my specific case is very contextual. There have been times when I knew that there would be a clash where I have rescheduled it or reprioritized it, but I'm keeping both identities happy. I am showing up. I'm not coming across as unprofessional by saying I'm not available in the middle of the day. But then on that particular day, I will negotiate with my trainer or I will reschedule it out. So I keep both identities happy because I'm not happy giving up either,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I'm not happy giving up either. So some days I have also turned down work meetings. Ideally, on most days, that time in my calendar is blocked. So I do get to engage with my fitness identity. But there are times when it's unavoidable, in which case I will go back and I will reprioritize. But I don't want to, at any point in time, be the person who's constantly prioritizing my work over my
yeah.
fitness. Right?
Yeah, that's the balance, right?
Yeah.
That's the juggling. That's the balance. Coming back to our
So our,
topic.
our, our to- our
That
topic of
example you
juggling,
gave
right? And there
one.
are, and I don't know, and for us it's on that day. I don't know if there is a, I don't know if you can kind of have a blanket rule around that, right? Right.
Just like a juggler also doesn't, right?
Yeah, it's juggling, right?
Or a balancer. It is even if you look at tight walking on a tightrope, it is you're taking cues from the situation in that moment from where you're leaning to come back.
Yeah. I think
So
there's one more question, and then we will.
yeah, we start.
Um,
There's a question. We allow the expectations of people from the past or certain past events that still unconsciously influence my identity. How to break free when the association is very strong. Should we do this next time? We're doing 4 rounds on this.
yeah. I
It's a
think I
deep.
think I think we've come out of time. So I think we'll want to close that. But do you want to take a quick take for a minute, and then
Yeah, a
we'll.
quick take and explore further.
Hmm.
Uh, okay. don't, I don't have a quick take. So I have an entire chapter in my book on this
Yeah.
of identities from the past. So I'll do a deep take next time.
I
But
think I think both of these questions we will. I think
yeah,
Sandeep has said, can you talk about the tension between identity synthesis and identity confusion? We'll talk about both of these questions. We'll start next session with answering these, which is 2 weeks from now.
yes.
It will be today is September 2, so we're talking about September 9, September 16,
So
I think.
Tuesday, next to next Tuesday, 8
It'll
p.m.
be around, I think, 16. Yeah, yeah. Next to next Tuesday, 2 weeks from now. We will answer. I'll take the first question a little bit. We allow expectations from the past or certain past events that still unconsciously influence my identity. I think the first step is raising the level of bringing it to consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And that means either through journaling. It means either if it's a trauma, probably through therapy. It is sometimes working with a coach. The first level is if it's unconscious, you have to make it conscious. That's the first step to
So
change, right?
awareness.
It's the awareness. You have to
Being
build the
aware
awareness.
that
Yeah.
it's there.
First is you have to build the awareness, and then depending on the complexity of it, sometimes just raising it to awareness makes it go away. Sometimes you have to actively work on it. But the first step is raising the awareness, like opening the curtains and being able to nail down that this is what is still affecting you. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've
And
had.
maybe since it's going to be 2 weeks, I'll just give this person one follow up the awareness with one more thing, which
Hmm.
is because the question asked, how do we break free? Now, you may not actually always need to even break free, because breaking free is tough. Remember what Shweta said about growing in layers, and so, and changing. And I'm not saying you can't go back into the past and change those patterns and all, but that's deep work for therapy for a long time. But in the here and now, what we can do is building on what Shweta so beautifully talked about as awareness through journaling or mindfulness or whatever, right? Meditation. For me, awareness comes when I sit down in silence. Whatever, once the awareness comes, then I call it almost like a decoupling. That, yeah, this is there, but I'm not going to function and operate it from it right now. So yeah, I have this shiny red ghagra in my wardrobe, but today I'm not going to wear it and go. But I'm not thrown and burnt that ghagra either. It will sit in my cupboard. Someday, if I feel like, I might go and wear that ghagra, but I'm not operating through that ghagra today. So remember that Asian women experiment, operating as Asians, operating as women, but they didn't really break the other base association. That.
I'm actually have a very contrarian view to this, but we don't
Okay.
have time today, so we're going to stop there.
Okay, yes.
But we do have a bunch of questions here. I don't know how to save these, but we'll come back to these two
We'll
weeks from
collect
now.
all of them and address them
Yeah, yeah,
next.
yeah. Okay. Super. Okay.
Okay.
Super. Chalo, take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.